Welcome to Simply Explained English. I am Lisa.
And I'm Eric. Do you want to improve your English easily? If so, you're in the right place.
Okay, today we'll listen to a podcast about some golden rules nobody taught you.
Let's listen to it.
Hello, and welcome to English Every Day. I'm Mark, and today we're talking about something super important for all English learners, how to communicate better.
And I'm Emma. We know many of you struggle with being understood or expressing yourselves clearly in English. Today, we'll share 5 simple hacks that will help you become a more confident speaker.
Remember, good English isn't just about knowing vocabulary and grammar. It's about how you deliver your message. So, Emma, many of our listeners tell us they know the words, but still have trouble communicating effectively. Why do you think that happens?
Well, Mark, I think there are 3 golden rules of communication that many learners forget. First, say what you mean clearly. Don't try to use fancy words just to show off.
That's so true. I've seen students use complicated words incorrectly when simpler ones would work better.
Exactly. The second rule is to check if people understand you. Don't just assume they do.
And the third?
Listen actively. Communication goes both ways. You need to understand others as well as be understood.
Those are great rules to remember. Now, let's get into our 5 practical hacks. The first one is, just keep talking, but mindfully. What does that mean?
It means using filler phrases to keep your speech flowing. Phrases like, you know, actually, or what I mean is, help you bridge gaps while you think of what to say next.
I notice many English learners freeze when they can't find the exact word they want. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. Instead of going silent, use these fillers, but be careful not to overuse them. Too many likes or you knows can make you sound nervous or unsure.
Can you give us an example of good use versus overuse?
Sure. A good use would be, the movie was, really interesting because of the plot twists. Overuse would be, the movie was actually really interesting. You know what I mean?
I see the difference. Our second hack is about rhythm and intonation. Why is this important?
Think of speech as music, Mark. If you talk too fast, people miss words. If you talk too slowly, they get bored. Finding the right rhythm keeps listeners engaged.
And intonation is about how your voice goes up and down, right?
Yes. In English, intonation can completely change meaning. Compare. You're coming? With voice rising at the end, that's a question. But you're coming, with voice falling, that's a statement.
I see. Let's try another example. I didn't say he stole the money can have different meanings depending on which word you stress.
If I say, I didn't say he stole the money, it means someone else said it. But I didn't say he stole the money suggests that someone else stole it.
That's fascinating. Our third hack is about ensuring clarity. How do we do that?
Always check if people understand you, especially in important conversations. You can say things like, am I making sense? Or, is that clear?
I hope we're on the same page, or if anything is unclear, just ask.
These phrases show you care about communication, not just about talking. They're especially important in work or school settings.
Our fourth hack is about seeking clarity from others. What if we don't understand what someone is saying to us?
Don't pretend to understand. It's perfectly okay to ask people to repeat themselves. You can say, I'm sorry, could you say that again? Or, I didn't quite catch that.
Or, could you explain that differently? These phrases are much better than nodding and pretending you understand.
Exactly. Misunderstandings can cause big problems later, especially at work or in group projects.
Our final hack is about body language. Why is this so important when we're focusing on speaking?
Because communication is only partly about words. Your facial expressions, gestures, and how you stand all affect how people receive your message.
What are some good body language tips for our listeners, Emma?
Keep an open posture. Don't cross your arms as it can make you seem closed off. Use hand gestures that match what you're saying, and always turn toward the person you're speaking with.
What about things to avoid?
Avoid fidgeting or looking at your phone while talking. It signals you're not interested, and never turn your back to someone while they're speaking to you.
I've heard about the baby pivot, turning your whole body towards someone to show you're listening.
Yes, it's such a simple thing, but it makes a huge difference in how engaged you seem.
These 5 hacks are really practical. Do you have any final advice for our listeners, Emma?
Practice these techniques in everyday conversations. Record yourself speaking to hear your rhythm and fillers. Watch English speakers on TV with the sound off to observe body language.
And remember, becoming a better communicator takes time. Be patient with yourself.
I'd also recommend finding a language partner to practice with. Many of our listeners have told us this really helps them apply these techniques in real conversations.
That's a great point, Emma. And speaking of practice, could you share a personal experience where these communication skills helped you?
Of course, when I first started teaching English, I had a student from Japan who was very quiet in class. I noticed her body language showed she was confused, even though she nodded when I asked if she understood. When I started checking for understanding in different ways and encouraging her to ask questions, her English improved dramatically in just a few weeks.
That's a wonderful example of how these techniques make a real difference. I've found that my international friends appreciate it when I speak at a moderate pace and check for understanding. It shows respect and builds trust.
Absolutely. And one more thing I'd like to add. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Every English speaker, even native ones, makes communication errors sometimes. The important thing is to keep trying and applying these hacks.
Perfect advice. And remember, listeners, these skills develop with practice. Try focusing on one hack each week until they become natural habits.
Well, that's all for today's episode. Remember our 5 hacks. Use mindful fillers. Pay attention to rhythm and intonation. Check for understanding. Ask for clarity. And use positive body language.
These skills will not only improve your English, but make you a more effective communicator in any language. Join us next week when we'll discuss common English idioms in the workplace.
Until then, keep practicing and speaking with confidence.
Goodbye.
What do you think about the podcast, Eric?
I really like the part about using filler phrases. And actually, that was cool.
Same here. And the intonation part was interesting. I didn't know how much it changes meaning.
Right? You're coming versus you're coming. Such a big difference. I also liked when Emma said, don't pretend to understand. That's something I need to remember.
Yeah, me too. Okay, let's start our podcast. What are the words today, Eric?
The first word today is fancy. Then we will continue with moderate and to engage. Then bridge the gap. And the final one is to be on the same page.
Okay, let's start with the first word.
The first word is fancy.
Fancy.
Fancy is such a fun word, and it has more than one use. Let's start with the most common one. When we say something is fancy, we usually mean it looks expensive, stylish, or very nice.
Like when someone wears a sparkling dress to a party. Wow, you look fancy tonight.
Exactly. Or when you go to a restaurant with soft lighting, waiters in suits, and 5 forks on the table. That's a fancy place.
Got it. Now, I've also heard fancy used as a verb, especially in British shows. Like, do you fancy a coffee?
Yes. Great point. In British English, fancy as a verb means you want something or feel like doing something. So, do you fancy a coffee just means, do you want a coffee?
And you can say things like, I fancy watching a movie tonight. right?
Exactly. And that brings us to a very important grammar tip. When you use fancy as a verb, it's followed either by a noun or by a verb in the ing form. So you say fancy a movie or fancy going out, but not fancy to go out. That would sound strange to native speakers.
So it's, do you fancy dancing? Not, do you fancy to dance?
Yep, fancy as a verb isn't common in American English, but it's still great to know, especially if you watch British TV or chat with British friends.
So, to wrap up, fancy can describe something elegant or expensive, and it can also mean want or like something, especially in British English. And when it's a verb, remember, use a noun or the ing form after it. Okay, well, shall we move on to the next word?
Let's do that. The next word is moderate.
Moderate.
Moderate is an adjective that means something that is not too much and not too little. It's in the middle.
Like when the weather is not hot and not cold, just nice?
Perfect example. You can say, we had moderate weather during our trip. That means the weather was comfortable, not extreme in any way.
So, moderate is a nice word to describe something that's average or gentle.
Yes. Let's try a few more examples. She has a moderate level of experience. That means I'm not a beginner, but not an expert either. He eats a moderate amount of sugar, so he doesn't eat too much, just a healthy amount.
So, it's often used to talk about amounts or intensity, right?
Right. Moderate speed, moderate noise, moderate exercise. These all suggest something is under control, in balance. You can also say, the prices are moderate, or the pain was moderate.
It sounds like a useful word when you don't want to exaggerate, when you just want to keep things neutral.
Exactly. If something isn't strong or weak, big or small, it's moderate. A great word when you want to describe balance.
Love it. So just to sum up, moderate as an adjective means something that's in the middle, not extreme. And we use it before nouns or after be.
Perfectly said.
Okay, well, we've explained the word moderate pretty well. Let's move on to the next word.
The next word is to engage.
To engage.
Yep, and it's a really useful one. At this level, we'll focus on one of the most common meanings. To engage means to take part in something or to become involved.
So, like joining an activity or being part of something?
Exactly. For example, you can say, the students engaged in a group project. That means they worked together. They were active in the project.
Oh, I see. So engage is similar to participate in that sentence.
Right. You could also say, he doesn't engage in small talk. That means he doesn't take part in casual, light conversation.
So is there a preposition we always use after it?
Yes, great question. When we use engage in this meaning, we usually follow it with the preposition in. Like engage in a conversation or engage in activities.
Got it. So the structure is usually someone engages in something.
Exactly. And it's often used in more formal or polite situations, like in school, work, or news. In casual talk, people might just say join or take part, but engage sounds a bit more formal or serious.
Is it always about groups, or can I use it when I'm doing something alone?
Good point. You can use it for solo activities too, like she engaged in deep thinking.
Oh, I like that. So it's not just about joining people, but also about putting energy and attention into something.
Exactly. It shows interest, focus, and being active, not passive.
Let's review. To engage means to get involved, to take part, and we often say engage in something. And it's a bit more formal than joining or participating.
Perfect summary, Lisa.
Okay, well, let's move on to the next word.
The next word is bridge the gap.
Bridge the gap. Ooh, I love this one. It's not about real bridges, by the way.
Right? Bridge the gap is an idiom. It means to connect two things that are different or to make the difference between them smaller. It's often used when two groups don't understand each other or when there's a space between ideas, generations, or cultures.
So, for example, this program helps bridge the gap between young people and the elderly.
Yep, that means the program helps them understand each other, maybe spend time together or learn from each other.
Nice. Another one. The free classes are trying to bridge the gap between rich and poor students.
Great example. It means the classes give both groups more equal chances.
So we use it when something is missing or when two sides are far apart, socially, emotionally, or even in skills.
That's right, Lisa.
And it's usually used in more formal or thoughtful conversation, right?
Yes, it sounds a bit more serious. You'll hear it in education, business, or social topics, not really in casual daily talk like, hey, let's bridge the gap and go to lunch. That would sound funny.
Ha ha ha, yeah, no one says that. So, quick review. To bridge the gap means to make two sides come closer, to connect them, or to reduce a difference.
And we often use it with groups of people, ideas, cultures, generations, or knowledge levels.
All right, that's all for the word bridge the gap. So, let's move on to the last word. What is the last word, Eric?
The last word is to be on the same page.
To be on the same page. This one is very common in everyday English. So, let's get into it. What does to be on the same page mean, Eric?
To be on the same page is an idiom that means that two or more people understand something the same way or agree about what's happening. For example, let's talk before the meeting to make sure we're on the same page. That means let's check if we agree and understand things the same way.
Or, I don't think we're on the same page about the budget. So maybe one person wants to spend more and the other wants to save. There's a difference. It's a great phrase to use when working in a team, in meetings, or even in relationships.
Absolutely. It's useful in both professional and personal situations. At work, before we start the project, are we all on the same page? At home, we need to be on the same page about the kids' bedtime.
That one sounds real.
Yeah, very real-life example.
So, to sum up, to be on the same page means to understand or agree with someone. We use it to show we're thinking in the same way.
It's clear, friendly, and super useful.
All right, that's all for today. We hope we're on the same page about what this phrase means now. We hope you found the words helpful and the explanations easy to understand.
Thanks for listening. Keep studying your English.
And stay tuned. Bye for now.